What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I'm a little bit excited because we are going to be learning how to play Keyforge. Last time I did a learn to play video, it was Transformers TCG. That video turned out to be very, very popular, at least in the context of this channel. So I think we should have a look at Keyforge. And if you're wondering what Keyforge is, I have done a video explaining what the card game is all about. Do check that one out. I'll pop a link in the description. First thing to remind you about with Keyforge, it is a unique deck game. It is not a trading card game. So there's no rules for building a deck. It's buy a deck. That is your deck. Play the deck. Alrighty then. So, we start off here learning to play Keyforge, and the first thing you need to do is you need to set up. And essentially what that comes down to is you randomly determine who goes first. Most people either flip a coin or roll a dice, and you either go evens or odds. The player going first draws 7 cards, the player going second draws 6 cards, and both players can mulligan once. That is, decide they don't like their opening hand, shuffle their hand into their deck and draw a new opening hand, but with 1 fewer card. If you're going first 6, if you're going second 5, but you can only do that once. Now, as you go through your turn, there are essentially 5 stages. The game is all about collecting Ember, and the goal of the game is to forge 3 keys, and it takes 6 Ember to forge a key. That is a default. There are obviously cards which can change this. And the first stage of your turn is forge a key. If you've got 6 Ember, you must forge a key, and you are only allowed to forge 1 key per turn. Even if you've got enough to forge 2, you can only forge 1. And what you do is you spend 6 Ember, you put them back in the communal pile, and you flip your key over. And then it's forged. As a side note, your Ember is collected on your character card, and then you just put it back into the collective pile when you forge a key. Second step here is you choose a house. Now your deck contains cards from 3 different houses, although you might end up controlling a character that doesn't belong to one of those houses. Again, this is a learn to play video. We're not going to go through every tiny little scenario. We're going to learn to play, but there's a lot of weird stuff that can happen as you get into it. And what you do is you choose one of your 3 houses, and then every card is free to play. There's no cost here. You can do whatever you want, but only using cards from that house. And this is referred to as your active house. Third part of the turn, you play, discard, and use cards of the active house. One important point to note here. If you go first, you are only allowed to use or discard a single card on turn 1. So if you go first, you draw an extra card at the beginning of the game, but you are limited to playing 1 card on your first turn. After that, you just go like normal. We'll get into that step a little bit more in a second. The fourth part of your turn, you ready your cards. Now, generally speaking, cards are played exhausted, that is tapped in a lot of games, they're sideways. You cannot use exhausted cards, they have to be ready. So what you do, after you've played and discarded all the cards you can or that you want to, you take all of your exhausted cards and you turn them back to ready so you can use them in a future turn. And finally, you draw cards. At the end of your turn, you draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. If you run out of cards, you just shuffle your discard pile and that becomes your deck. If you have more than 6 cards in hand, that's fine. You do not have to discard down until you've got 6. And an important thing to note here, if you've got 6 or more Ember on your character at this stage of your turn, you must announce check to essentially let your opponent know that you will be forging a key next turn. Remember, forging a key is not an optional action. You must do if you're able to do so. So that's the basics of what you do during your turn, but now we need to go into actually playing cards, step number 3, which is by far the bulk of your turn. Now, the important thing to note here, this game is all about collecting Ember. And there are certain cards that have an Ember bonus. You can see it on the side of the card here. When you play the card, you get an Ember. Yay! Now, some cards have play abilities. These are extra abilities that activate when you play a card. So you can see the Doctor here on the screen. When you play it, you get to gain extra Ember. Yay! There's also such a thing as constant abilities. These always work. So the Mother card here says you can draw an extra card during the draw card step, and constant abilities always work, even if the card is exhausted. Remember, when you play these cards, they enter the play area exhausted, and you have to wait a turn for them to become ready. Fourth part of your turn is ready your cards. Now there are 4 types of cards: actions, artifacts, upgrades, and creatures. So an artifact you play behind the battle line. All your creatures go on the battle line, artifacts go behind. They start exhausted, just like creatures, and they remain in play until they're removed. So Gauntlet of Command here has an action, ready and fight with a friendly creature from any house. There is also such a thing as an Omni ability, which is the same as your usual ability, except it can be used even if the card doesn't belong to the active house, which is pretty good. It gives you an extra action to use. That sounds good to me. Upgrades attach to a creature in order to, and this might shock you, upgrade them, and they remain in play until the creature is removed. So you can see Protect of the Weak here, amongst other things, gives your creature +1 armor. You can also see there is an Ember bonus here, so you get an extra one of those when you actually play the upgrade here, which is quite nice, not just for creatures. Creatures come into play exhausted, and you have to wait a turn for them to be ready. You play them on the battle line, but they always have to enter on one of the flanks. That is to say, you've got your battle line of creatures, and you've got to play it on the end of the line when it comes in. We also have action cards, and these are essentially single-use cards. You use them and put them in the discard. So Warsong here, for instance, for the remainder of the turn, you gain 1 Ember each time a friendly creature fights. That sounds pretty good, because, you know, Ember helps you to win the game. Now, in terms of discarding cards, you just discard the cards you want to from your hand. The whole point of this is you get rid of cards you don't want, so you can play more. So we've talked about playing cards and we've talked about discarding cards, but we also need to talk about using cards. Once you've got a creature in play or an artifact, and they're ready, as in not exhausted, you can use them. And essentially, you've got 3 options here for your creatures. You can reap, initiate action abilities, or fight. Reaping is very simple. You set your creature to work reaping Ember, you gain an Ember, they end up exhausted. And there might be a reap action here whereby an action comes in on the creature when you actually go about reaping. In terms of using abilities, if the character is ready, and remember they've all got to be of the active house, you use the action and you exhaust the card. So we talked about Gauntlet of Command earlier. Okay, it's an artifact, not a creature, but it still totally works. You can use this to ready and fight with one of your friendly creatures from any house. Or you can fight. Again, if you want to fight with a creature, it's got to be ready, it's got to be from the active house. What you do is exhaust a card and you choose an enemy creature. If there are no enemy creatures, obviously you can't fight. And what you do is you look at the power and the armor of each character, and you deal damage equal to the power minus the armor. If you do more damage than the character has power, you KO them. You destroy them in the parlance of the game. So your power here basically works as both your attack and your health. So if we take an example here, we've got Staunch Knight, power 4, armor 2, and Quixo the Adventurer, power 3, armor 0. Although when you fight with Quixo, i.e. you're the one initiating, you cannot take any damage, which is quite nice, and it's even got a fight skill here, draw a card. In the same way some characters have an action when you reap, Quixo has an action when you fight. What is very important to note, you only resolve the fight ability if you're still alive after the fight has concluded. So if Quixo attacks Staunch Knight, you've got 3 power, but Staunch Knight's got 2 armor, you deal 1 damage, nothing happens to you because your ability says take no damage when you fight with it. If Staunch Knight, however, attacks Quixo the Adventurer, you've got a power of 4 compared to an armor of 0, you deal 4 damage, Quixo is KO'd, you would not draw a card because you're not alive at the end of the fight. Whereas Staunch Knight would still take 1 damage, Quixo would deal 3, minus the 2 armor is 1. Both of the characters involved in the fight deal damage of their power minus the other creature's armor. What you saw in there was an example of changing the rules. Generally speaking, Quixo should be KO'd if it attacks Staunch Knight, 4 power, 0 armor, but it's got an ability, takes no damage when you fight with it. There are a million different examples of this that we really do not have time to get into right now, but it's one of those, as you play the game, you just read the card, you do what the card says. And in the official playing guide, the very first point, the golden rule, if the text of a card directly contradicts the text of the rules, the text of the card takes precedence. So there's going to be all kinds of complicated cards that break the rules here. We can get into them as we start playing. For now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to hear from you guys. Tell me what you think of this game. Tell me how excited you are. Go nuts in the comment section, but do please remember the rule. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where I ramble about stuff. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.